Hi, so in this video I'm just going to be comparing the conventions that I've picked out from the Sight and Sound magazine review in comparison to the review I've done. Now I'd already sort of wrote this down and picked it out because, as you can see, I've already made my own version of this for my final piece. But obviously I'm doing this now, just recording what my research was for the intention of you obviously understanding that I, put the time in and researched how to create this sort of product and how to make it look similar to a professional magazine, professional magazine review. So first of all, you'll notice the design choices. The top red bar, which is like a header, has is in there. I've also added my own twist in. I've added the word short film at the top. Usually they have a piece of writing above the red bar that says film review or, something like along those lines, documentary review, something like that. What I decided was to add this onto the red section just so I'd have more space to use underneath as well. I've gone with a larger title as I felt, that was the focus of the whole thing. Sight and Sound obviously have a lot more to write about within theirs, so spacing is more key to that, but I felt that a bigger title would be better for the film I'm producing. I've also matched up the picture there. What I'll show you after this is that the red caption text underneath is a convention they use often. Captions for photos are done in red. I've done that on the other page, but not on this section here, as I felt this was just, it didn't really need a caption, and it was just to show the main character. The writing underneath the title, I've gone with the place filmed, the director, and the duration of the film. This is something that Sight and Sound uses, but I also decided to include who had written the review here. This isn't specifically a convention of Sight and Sound, but is a convention of other film magazines such as Little White Lies and Empire. They would use a name for each review, obviously, because not just one person writes the whole thing. They need credit on their work, so I put that at the start of the review instead of the end, as I decided to go later on with a synopsis. As you can see straight away, 3 columns was the layout of Sight and Sound, which is exactly what I've gone with 3 columns in my own interpretation of this. I'd started off with 2 columns, but I revised this decision based on the fact that it didn't look I was not paying close enough attention to the conventions of Sight and Sound. 3 columns is a genuine, obvious convention of this, and I wasn't paying attention to this at the start, so I actually started off with a 2 column piece that didn't look as good as this one. You'll also notice I've gone with a red quote at the bottom of mine. This isn't actually featured in Sight and Sound, but it was something that is a convention of other film magazines, so I decided to go with that. At the bottom of the page, we have the page number. I've made up a magazine name. I think I called it Film Reel Reviews, and I've gone with the month and year. This is a convention of Sight and Sound. They do that, and I've pretty much all I've done is swapped out the name of the magazine, obviously, because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to use the Sight and Sound name. In between columns, Sight and Sound use a dotted line to split columns. This is something that I added in to my own piece, and it definitely made it look more professional and match Sight and Sound more correctly. Touching on the fonts as well, I think I went with Minion Pro, which was the closest I could find to the Sight and Sound fonts. I did try and research the specific fonts they used, but this was to no avail pretty much. And Sight and Sound, looking at it by eye, is very similar. No, sorry, Minion Pro is very similar to Sight and Sound's font, looking at it by eye. The title I went with Arial, and I think the top bar I just used my whichever font I felt was best, as this wasn't a convention of their magazine. I just went with a font that looked narrow because I felt that that would be the best looking part of that. So now what I just need quickly to do is to pull up the second part of this magazine review. So now that those have been swapped over, you can see the second part of mine, carrying on the theme obviously with 3 columns and all the conventions I previously mentioned. The only thing I'd add on to this is that I've gone with a bottom image, sort of like a footer is what it's actually referred to within journalism, is a footer image with the caption in red text, like I said. matching the convention of sight and sound. I think I said that Michael Driscoll's expressions forge Adam, or help forge Adam, which is very true in our film, I believe. I've also gone with a synopsis. You can see in that bottom, in that last paragraph, this is actually derived from Sight and Sound as well. They go with a synopsis, which I'll zoom into now. So what I've quickly just popped on your screen there, you'll see is an example of the film synopsis. So what Sight and Sound do, they give you a general overview of the film and what it's about, the setting, things like that, and just a general feel for the film. So this is something obviously that I wanted to replicate with my own synopsis, which features at the end, which is a very small paragraph detailing the basic plot of the film. This was obviously a convention that I wanted to copy and pull across, and as you can see, I've taken a lot of inspiration from Sight and Sound. As regards to like sort of the writing style, I'll quickly go over that. I've actually written for magazines before and been published in magazines before, so I sort of knew the sort of style and how to replicate that. So I've obviously gone into a lot of technical details of film and into the technical details of film and sort of touched like sort of the way they speak and the language used. I've tried to replicate sort of high education style, and obviously it's going to be very difficult to, you know, like for like replicate these very like educated and experienced writers, but I've tried sort of my best way of interpreting that and using, you know, words that they use within my text. So what I did was read through a lot of Sight and Sound magazines, pick out words I liked, and then try to feature them in my own magazine review. And I feel that I've sort of accomplished that in a ways that the styles sort of match up, and you can see where I'm aiming for and how it's meant to be like Sight and Sound in both design and writing style. So that's sort of the conventions of Sight and Sound and how I replicated those for my own magazine review. Obviously this was part of my research, and I haven't actually got physical evidence of me well, I've got like writing in books and things, but what I'll have to do obviously is show my research into this. So I'll probably do a few more videos just talking about this, but this is more along the lines of the conventions of Sight and Sound and how I made that match for my own magazine review. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.